Metaplanet has just released their Phase 2 presentation and it has me super excited. So today I want to break down what I find most important throughout this presentation. But essentially Metaplanet it's clear with their recent international offering and then obviously this new presentation that they are moving towards increasing their ability to issue perpetual preferreds at a large scale. So getting into the presentation, they have this slide going into kind of the core behind Metaplanet, some ways they're able to generate revenue, and then their operations through their Bitcoin Treasury of issuing common equity, and then being able to issue perpetual preferreds in the future. So it's clear that with their recent international offering, they were trying to build up their Bitcoin balance sheet to be able to issue perpetual preferreds at a much larger scale. So they're kind of moving a little bit away from the common equity side of things and moving towards that perpetual preferred side of their Bitcoin treasury operations. And then on top of that, they've got some revenue generating businesses. They currently have Bitcoin income generation through some options trading. They've been selling put options on Bitcoin, so they've been able to generate some revenue through that. They have this Project Nova that's coming soon. It's classified, not too sure exactly what will be happening with that, but I'm excited to hear more about that as we get more information on that. And then they also do have a website that they plan on monetizing through like advertisements and different things like that. And then these different revenue income streams, they announced that they would like to use these revenue incomes to be able to fund the dividends on their perpetual preferreds. Let's take a look at Metaplanet's plan for issuing perpetual preferreds, which is what they are shifting towards and want to become the focus of their Bitcoin treasury. Looking at the case in Japan, there is going to be very high demand for these instruments because Japanese investors like to hold a lot of cash, and they're not getting a whole lot of yield on their cash. You can see right here, there's 7.5 trillion in Japanese household savings between cash and deposits, and the domestic short end yields is 0.5%. So Japanese investors are holding lots of cash and they don't get a whole lot of yield on their cash. What Metaplanet wants to do is they want to be able to offer a perpetual preferred where Japanese investors can get a dividend on their yield, and that dividend they don't want to have become anything greater than 6%, so they're capping it at 6% per year. Let's also remember what a perpetual preferred means. With a perpetual preferred, there is no maturity date, meaning that the initial investment does not necessarily have to be repaid at any certain date. So, for example, if you were to put $100 into a perpetual preferred, Metaplanet could use that $100, go ahead and buy Bitcoin, and they would only be obligated to be paying $6 per year on that $100 originally invested. That would take 16 years just to pay back that dividend. So Metaplanet could get $100 worth of Bitcoin and just pay $6 per year every year. And it would take 16 years to pay back that original investment. Think about what Bitcoin's going to be worth in 16 years. I think that's going to be an investment that is going to pay off wildly for Metaplanet when they get money now to buy Bitcoin and they don't even have to pay back that same amount of money for a whole nother 16 years. And then after that point, they're just paying 6% interest on that. Now, how do they plan to pay these dividends on these perpetual preferreds? Well, they currently have some Bitcoin income generation by selling put options on their Bitcoin, in which they just had a record quarter. We'll take a look at more into that in a moment here. They also plan on monetizing this website, bitcoin.jp, for additional revenue that they have not yet seen. And then this additional project, which is classified Project Nova. I don't have a whole lot of information for you on that because it is classified, but I'm excited to see what that has to offer in the future. Looking at Metaplanet's revenue, they made over 2.4 billion Japanese yen just this quarter, which comes out to a little over 16 million US dollars. And again, this income is just from their current Bitcoin income generation strategy. So going back to that previous slide, that's just from this strategy right here. It does not include the future revenue they plan to, they might be able to make with this Bitcoin.jp website or with Project Nova. So they made over 16 million US dollars just from that Bitcoin income generation model. And if you were to put that in terms of these perpetual preferreds, that would be enough to pay for a full year's worth of dividends if they had raised over 250 million US dollars in these perpetual preferreds. Because if they were to have raised $250 million in perpetual preferreds and they just had to pay 6% on that each year, that would come out to a roughly 16 million US dollars. So just this quarter alone, just that revenue would be enough to pay the annual dividend for $250 million of perpetual preferreds. How can you not be hyper bullish on Metaplanet right now? These perpetual preferreds also act as a great defense mechanism if MNAV compresses significantly and the stock trades at an MNAV that's below a 1. Because if the MNAV is below a 1, it would be impossible for the company to accretively buy Bitcoin by issuing more stock. Because if they were to issue more stock with an MNAV below a 1, they would have to multiply their shares greater than they could multiply their Bitcoin stack by, making the Bitcoin per share for investors actually go down, even though the company bought more Bitcoin. So if they were to issue shares when MNAV was below a 1, it would actually be detrimental to the shareholders. However, even if the MNAV is trading below a 1, it would not matter for issuing perpetual preferreds and it would still be accretive for shareholders. So looking at Metaplanet, if they were to offer a dividend of 6% per year on these perpetual preferreds, they wouldn't need their MNAV to even trade above a 1. They would simply need Bitcoin to grow slightly. Bitcoin doesn't even have to grow significantly. Just a little bit of growth in Bitcoin per year would be accretive for shareholders using these perpetual preferreds. So obviously, if Bitcoin grows by 0% per year, yes, this number would not be accretive for shareholders. However, if it just grows at a rate of 10% per year over the course of 10 years, that would be the equivalent of almost the equivalent of issuing the common stock and MNAV of 1.62, which would still be accretive for shares because that MNAV is greater than a 1, so they would be able to multiply their Bitcoin holdings more than they would be multiplying their shares outstanding by. And then if you look here, if the more and more bullish you are on Bitcoin, the more and more bullish you would be on Metaplanet. So this is why I really don't get why lots of Bitcoin maxis are not bullish on Metaplanet. If you are inherently bullish on Bitcoin, you are bullish on Metaplanet. Looking at a Bitcoin annual return rate of 30% per year, that would be the equivalent of selling common shares at an MNAV of over 8, which would be insanely accretive for the shareholders. Graphing out Metaplanet's Bitcoin per share, we can see that their Bitcoin per share grew exponentially. And then right at the point where their MNAV was really starting to compress fast, that Bitcoin per share really started to slow down because when they went to issue new shares, they had to issue a significantly more shares to buy less Bitcoin. So it was a little bit less accretive while it was still accretive and their Bitcoin per share was going up a little bit. it wasn't nearly as accretive as when they were trading at a higher MNAV. Like when they were trading at an MNAV of 4 to 7, this Bitcoin per share was growing like crazy. So if we go back to that previous slide, again, looking at if they were to issue perpetual preferreds now at a 6% dividend, and Bitcoin just grew at a 30%, grew annually at an average rate of 30%, it doesn't matter what Metaplanet's MNAV is at that point, just those two factors alone would equate to them trading at about an 8.62 MNAV if they were to issue the common stock. So going back to this slide here, when their MNAV was high, just at like a 4 to 7, their Bitcoin per share was super accretive. They were able to buy a lot of Bitcoin without diluting many shares. On top of that, if they can increase their revenue even more and use that revenue to pay these perpetual preferreds and not dilute shareholders, this Bitcoin per share is just going to go practically vertical. So yeah, I am extremely bullish on Metaplanet. I think that this is a very smart strategy. With that, that's all I have for you guys. Thank you all for watching. My name is Ian Gillespie. If you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing to support my work and to support this channel.